Welcome once again to Cinemaholics, where we talk about the biggest and best films coming to theaters and streaming online. From the San Francisco Bay Area, I am John Negroni, film editor for The Young Folks. From Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he's a pop culture writer for Cinema Blend. It's Will Ashton.
Hey.
Don't forget to find more episodes of our show and all kinds of bonus content on cinemaholics.com. You'll even find written reviews, all kinds of things you just might love. And you can write into the show anytime. Send us an email, cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com, or go to our Patreon to support our show, patreon.com/cinemaholics. Will Ashton, so much to talk about, so much to get to, but we're just doing 2 movies this weekend. Like, what's going on?
Well, I mean, we both had pretty busy weekends. You were away and I was working, so we only had the chance to see Last Night in Soho, which I think we both saw a decent bit ago. I saw it almost a week ago. And
I saw it more than a week ago myself.
Right. So we're finally talking about that. And then we're going to talk about a film we saw at Sundance back in January, almost a year ago now.
Even longer.
Called Passing. So we're hitting them fresh and early with these reviews.
That's true.
Yeah.
We're in the throngs of award season, so it is a bit unusual because at this current moment, I mean, there are so many movies to watch and talk about. We're trying to be choosy, but we're also busy. Yeah, I was on a trip. I was on my first trip out of California since the pandemic. It's ridiculous. I can't believe I made it back. Nothing bad has happened. Knock on any wood near me. And I gotta say, I feel like I missed a lot. I was trying to catch up on what's been going on. Everybody's losing their minds, but I guess that's pretty normal.
Yeah.
In the film discourse world. An Edgar Wright movie came out this past weekend. I haven't seen what the takes are, but I'm sure they're plentiful. And I haven't seen a lot of chatter about Passing. I mean, I know we should say, Passing, we'll talk about it, but it's not on Netflix yet. It's a Netflix acquired movie. It's just in theaters. I mean, people are probably not going to get going with this movie till later, but it's a stacked month. I mean, you were telling me, John, we can't put off Passing. We just can't do it.
Well, yeah.
We're going to be too busy.
Well, the weekend of the 5th is just, there are a bunch of things coming out. I mean, technically, The Harder They Fall has already come out, but that's hitting Netflix. We got Eternals, we got Spencer, we got Finch on Apple TV, Beta Test, a bunch of other things we could talk about. It just, and then as you were mentioning before, we just have a bunch of stuff coming out at the end of November. There's really only one weekend where it's kind of calm. So we just, if we're going to get to it, we better get to it now, especially because, it's already. Yeah.
I hope it doesn't sound like we're complaining. It's like, oh, we have to watch all of these movies, but it's not like that. It's just sort of like, wow, we get to do this really cool thing. We get to watch all these things, but it's a lot to manage. I hope we're being accountable. We're watching the right stuff. We're reviewing the right stuff. I know you saw Antlers. I didn't. The listeners know I reject watching it. I don't want to watch it. I don't care. But you're going to talk about it with hopefully a really special guest pretty soon. So, stay tuned for that.
Yeah, we were trying to set up this weekend. It didn't work out. It was more my lack of availability than theirs. But I'm going to hopefully do that sometime this week. And I'm excited for that if it comes together. So hopefully look out for that.
Same here. Last week, Will, we were looking at the roster of films we could talk about, right? And we had an extended conversation about a new movie that's out this week that we didn't watch. Paranormal Activity: Next of Kin. I think we're looking at that's a 6th or 7th. I think 7th. Paranormal Activity movie, but it's like a reboot thing.
Right.
It's on Paramount Plus, and Blumhouse produced it. Big thing for them, I guess. But we didn't watch it, and we kind of put it out to the listeners. I want to say, we're like, listeners, tell us, if you want us to check this out, let us know. We didn't get a single request. Nobody was chomping for some paranormal content.
Yeah, so, silence was deafening in this case. Yeah. So no one, I don't even know if anyone watched that movie, to be fair. I'm guessing somebody did because it's on Paramount Plus, but
I saw a handful of tweets about it, but people were just kind of, one of the reasons I didn't check it out today, since I got back, was because I had a different screening. And so I didn't really add a lot of other stuff to get to. But then also people were telling me this thing was buggy. Somebody was saying I couldn't even get through it. I mean, it just kept bugging out on me halfway through the movie, couldn't finish it. So
you mean that's a Paramount Plus problem?
Yeah, potentially like some issue with the coding or the encoding rather. And I mean, I don't know. I didn't experience it myself. So it's through the grapevine, right? Could be an isolated issue, but it definitely seemed like an anomaly. You know, it's not a person who has like weak internet connection. I'll say that.
Yeah.
That other movie I did see is one that is rolled out in a very small amount of theaters. It's going to actually be hitting its official release this weekend. The Souvenir Part 2 from A24. I'm working on my review for it. It's coming. I can't wait to talk about The Souvenir Part 2, a big movie from A24. But yeah, other than that, we said Antlers, Souvenir. Okay, Army of Thieves, Netflix movie, big Netflix movie. We talked about the movie that like came before Army of Thieves, Army of the Dead, which was a Zack Snyder. I don't know why I thought Army of the Dead was Michael Bay, but I guess that's fitting. But no, Army of Thieves, which is like a prequel spinoff, and we didn't watch that either. To be honest, Will, because I was watching movies on the plane. I watched a little bit of Bergman Island, and I didn't even think about Army of Thieves. Like I could have gone to Netflix and be like, all right, let me download this Army of Thieves. I'll watch it on the plane. Will and I will chat. Didn't do it. I forgot.
Yeah, I didn't realize you started Bergman Island. It's very exciting for me.
I did. Well, usually I notify you whenever I start something, but I was on the plane.
Right.
I was in airplane mode. So, I got interrupted though. I got about 30 minutes into the movie, digging it so far, but yeah, I'm holding off until I'm able to finish it. I got all this other stuff just getting in the way. Also, there's a Mouthful of Air from Amy Compliment, which I know that movie with Amanda Seyfried and Finn Wittrock is apparently supposed to be.
Sure.
Oh, and your buddy, Paul Giamatti.
Oh, really? All right.
Yeah, he's supposed to be in that.
Nice.
I heard that's worth checking out.
Oh, is it? I don't know. It looked kind of cheesy, but, it's Paul Giamatti, so.
I don't know anything about it. I haven't seen a trailer, so I don't know. It could be cheesy. It could be savory. Who knows?
Yeah. There's
also Violet, another Sundance movie, but we chose, or was it Sundance, or was it actually, no, it was South by Southwest, wasn't it?
Yeah, South by.
Yeah.
We saw it. I don't know. You can tell listeners why we're not covering it.
I thought we already talked about it.
Well, a little bit we did.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of buzz for this. I mean, it's different from Passing, because Passing is going to be on Netflix. I think way more people are going to see it. And I think I already talked about Violet when we were doing South by content, so I'm kind of good.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I mean, go back if you want to hear our thoughts on Violet. I guess go to our South by Southwest episode and hear them there.
There are a few more, but I only wanted to mention one more. The Spine at Night, which is on Shudder.
Is that
you
on
saw
Shudder?
it,
Okay.
I didn't.
Yeah, I saw that back at South by as well.
Richard E. Grant, Lucy Lawless, Patton Oswalt.
Decent film. Fun enough.
So that does not get me stoked. That doesn't get me like, well, I gotta wake up in the spine of night to see this.
I mean, listeners know I'm not the biggest fantasy guy, but I think it's a fun kind of role-playing sort of type of movie if you really love like role-playing games and fantasy world and stuff like that.
That kind of role-play. Bummer.
Sure.
You almost had me.
Yeah, I mean, it's not about that per se. It's not like a Jumanji sort of thing. But
yeah, Jumanji. That's what I was thinking about. Yeah, when you said.
Yeah, no, it feels like you're like in someone's world though, like in that sort of thing. And it's like I said, it's been a while since I've seen it, so I could be speaking out of turn. I saw it late at night during a virtual film festival, so my memory of it's a bit hazy. But I remember it being enjoyable, a bit exhausting, but also spirited and fun in many spurts. So I would say, I'd say I was a fan. I'd say it's worth checking out, but not like a rush to Shudder type film to see. But if you like that sort of thing, you like animation, if you like adult animation, especially, I think it's a film worth seeing, but not a like absolute must see.
All right. Well, you got me hooked, but I got to be honest with you, Will Ashton. I wouldn't lie to you and be like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll be sure to check that out. Well, I'm not going to check it out anytime soon. It would have to take some doing because there's just so much.
It's funny you say that though, because I actually think you would enjoy Spine at Night. But what have you been watching?
Well, I was gonna say Wheel of Time. I just got into the first episode. Got the first 6 episodes on deck. It comes out November 19th, I think, on Amazon. Sure. And yeah, if you're a fantasy fan, I can't say anything about this. I can't say it's good or bad. So I'm embargo, but I can say I've been watching it, and I am I am so excited to talk about Wheel of Time. Like I'm just,
Okay.
I want to say something so badly. I can't. I got to hold my tongue. Unless I lose all the privileges of embargoes and screeners. So
Sure. Well, it's a big time for fantasy adaptations, I guess, depending on how you classify Dune. I guess more sci-fi.
I think it's more sci-fi. Yeah, I mean a little bit of fantasy, not really. I mean, if this is like a different kind of. This is like, all right, let's get another Game of Thrones off the ground here, kind of thing. It's not really.
But there's what's that other show? Foundation.
Yeah, sci-fi.
That's sci-fi. Okay.
Yeah, that's even more sci-fi than Dune. I mean, that's really? Isaac Asimov. That's like the sci-fi stuff.
All right, and that's kind of getting a muted response, it seems. So
more people, I'm actually seeing some good takes about the show. I haven't watched the show. I have read the book, love the book, and I'm hearing that the show is worth checking out if you're a fan, and so. I'm going to be checking out Foundation as well. Another thing I downloaded for the plane, but I didn't get to. I also downloaded Squid Game. Didn't get to that. You know what I ended up watching mostly on the plane, Will Ashton?
Sopranos.
That's right. And because it was difficult. I was on the plane. I couldn't concentrate. And I was like, all right, well, I gotta see what my old pals Christopher and Polly are up to.
Yeah, and Tony and Melfi and Carmela and all of them,
and my best bud Bobby.
And Pio Mai and everybody.
The whole gang was there. But okay, that's enough Soprano talk. Let's get into our first review of the week here. Last Night in Soho.
Baby, you don't know what you're saying.
So what brings you down then?
I'm studying London College of Fashion.
Room is on the top floor.
It's perfect. I love it. If I could live any place and any time, I'd live here, in London, in the 60s. Last night, I saw something in my dreams. There was a girl.
And you are?
Sandy.
Last Night in Soho is the latest film from Edgar Wright, a British filmmaker. And he is a filmmaker who, I said this in my review, when he makes a movie, I pay attention. I don't lose the plot, unlike him in some of his work. But that said, I am very much an Edgar Wright fan. I think, not because we haven't talked about Last Night in Soho yet. So up until Last Night in Soho, I don't think the guy's made a bad movie. I just don't. And some people disagree with me. And I think, we can go through it, right? I mean, we already talked about an Edgar Wright movie earlier this year. We talked about Sparks Brothers, which is a very good documentary, I think. Very solid.
Good stuff.
Yep. Most people, when they're like, all right, my favorite Edgar Wright movie, a lot of them go to Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, the
Hot Fuzz
sophisticated... Hot Fuzz is yours. Yeah. Great. The Sophisticates be like, it's The World's End. That's the unsung Wright film. Sure. Right? And I get it. Very, very good film as well. The Cornetto trilogy is fantastic. I love all three of those movies. Now, that said, Scott Pilgrim versus the World. That's the Edgar Wright movie that, boy, first one I saw in theaters. I wasn't able to see Hot Fuzz in theaters.
Same here.
Which I was pretty bummed about. Should have been. I was the right age to see it in theaters too. Shaun of the Dead, I was a little bit too young. I don't, parents weren't going to approve. But by the time Hot Fuzz was out, I was like 16. So
yeah, I was like 13 or 14, I think. So
yeah, but then Scott Pilgrim though, that movie, I remember watching that the week of release. I'd been hyped about it for weeks. I never read the graphic novel or anything, but I was hooked by the trailer, right? I wasn't even like a Michael Cera fan. I hadn't watched Arrested Development yet or anything like that. I had seen Juno and on all that stuff, but
super bad.
But yeah, I think that movie though. Well, I love the creativity of it. I love the innovation and like the fact that I liked the movie even though I hated the main character. It was just a lot of fun, and I was really impressed with how he was able to condense like all that material into just like one movie. I thought it was pretty impressive. Nobody watched the movie. Like people liked it. But that movie, I remember I worked at a second run theater at the time, a discount dollar theater. First week I saw it in release. The next week it was at the dollar theater. That's what happened in our town. Like the movie bombed. It just, it bombed, right?
Bombed, yeah. It's good.
There you go.
It lost out to Expendables, I remember.
Which, this is not that surprising in retrospect, but I mean, at this point in Edgar Wright's career, the guy was on an ascent. It was like the first time something was like, wait, how this guy made a movie and people didn't lose their minds. He makes The World's End, which gets, not the strongest response in the world. I think people were like, yeah, okay, we've seen this kind of thing before, although it was very unusual. I mean, that movie has a bizarre ending. And then he comes out with Baby Driver, his biggest hit ever. Huge hit for him. A movie that I don't even think, because he financed it himself. People weren't expecting it to be, like, it was literally going to be, I think it was going to be an August release. They moved it up because of its response at South by. They were like, oh, shoot, this is a summer movie. And they were right. What does that mean? Okay, so let's talk about it. All right. People look back on Baby Driver, and I'm seeing this discourse now where it's like, you know what? Baby Driver is a bad movie. It's not good. It was never good. And I'm just like,
yeah.
What are we doing here? What?
You were very favorable on the film, I remember.
Yes, it was my favorite movie of 2017.
Right.
I've seen the movie many times, and I'm just feeling like people saw this movie once, and then like some time passed, and they saw other people were criticizing it with valid criticisms because it's a movie, and people have just decided, like, there's like this new narrative that it's not actually a good movie, which is bizarre. Well, it's like, yeah, Kevin Spacey is, like,
and Ansel
that's
Elgort.
regrettable. And Ansel Elgort, even though he is starring in West Side Story later this year.
Right. Well, they filmed that,
yeah,
before the allegations, but yeah.
But I'm just saying, I think that it's like, I don't know, it's almost like, oh, I got to be cool and say that I hate Baby Driver. And I don't think it's very fair at all to the actual movie.
Yeah, I was colder on it than you. I still liked it. I have only seen it the one time myself. I think it's fine. I enjoy it. I would probably still like it if I saw it now, but it's certainly not among my favorite Edgar Wright films.
I just think that people really underestimate that movie. And I think that movie is just like, it's so rewatchable because it's just so practical. The stunt work in it and the editing and the music, it all goes together so well. And I can throw my own complaints at it for sure. It's a movie that ends very strangely, and some of the character relationships aren't great, but it's a movie. Yeah. Like, it's an original story. It's based kind of on a music video, but like, I don't know. This is what I mean. It's like, it's a movie that actually works, that does the right stuff, that's original, and it's not just a bunch of CGI, and people turn up their noses at it.
Right. Yeah, for me, it was more about the screenplay, especially the way that the women characters were written. And I think that was one aspect about Last Night in Soho, to tie it back to that film, that I found very interesting, is that there's been a lot written about it, and I'm surely not the person to comment on it, but going back to Shaun of the Dead, Edgar Wright has had issues as far as like depicting women in his films. I think a lot of times they're kind of seen as like the stern characters compared to the man children, who get a little bit more freedom to kind of play out and be complex and nuanced in their dysfunction, I guess. But yeah, I think Last Night in Soho, what was so intriguing, I guess, from the onset, is that he finally had a chance to have like some more complex, nuanced women characters at the forefront. And I think that comes with a lot of pluses. And I think the way that he depicts women in the film is also filled with some negatives as well.
Well, we got to break it down, right? Because Edgar Wright, he's a guy, his whole career, like you're saying, he writes very tropey female characters. I can't imagine, like, if he had been able to actually do Ant-Man, I can't even imagine what Hope Van Dyne would be like. It's actually kind of, I think it would have been cool to see his version of Ant-Man, but I think what we got with Peyton Reed was pretty solid. So
yeah, it was okay. I was gonna say I guess the main exception to what I was saying before would probably be Scott Pilgrim, as far as like, like Ramona Flowers, I think, is a pretty interesting character. I think a lot of that comes from Mary Elizabeth Winstead's performance. But yeah, I think yeah. And
also that it's an adaptation, and Ramona Flowers was such a well-realized character in the graphic novels that he was pulling from, right?
Absolutely.
And I think it's so odd because I think he has struggled with women characters for whatever reason. I think that throughout his career, he struggled to make them feel authentic and multidimensional. That Baby Driver, that is the chief issue that I have with the movie that I think holds it back from being an all-time great, is the fact that Lily James, I mean, she makes it work within the parameters of something very limited, because really on paper, that character is bafflingly out of touch. But I think he's doing it on purpose. I think he's like calling me back nostalgically to a time when, you could just like meet somebody on the street and then like whisk away this like dream fantasy romance sort of thing. And
yeah, if you're looking at it as it's if like Baby Driver's is sort of like James Dean, Rebel Without a Cause kind of character, and she's like like the like loving, doing wife, or not wife, I guess girlfriend in this scenario and all this. And yeah, I mean, I can get what he's going for there. I guess for me, knowing how subversive Edgar Wright can be as a filmmaker, I guess I was expecting something more, especially having an actress as great as Lily James in that part. And like 2/3 the way through, just like, oh no, that's just what she is. She's kind of a two-dimensional character, which is a shame.
It is a shame. It is. But that is what made Last Night in Soho so promising for a lot of people, because a lot of people were looking at this man's career and being like, he makes interesting films. He does things as a director that other directors don't bother doing, which is he rehearses his scenes a lot. He just does like old fashioned tricks with the camera to make magic on screen in a way that we just don't get enough of. It's a big reason why I defend the guy quite a bit.
Yeah.
But it's hard to defend the writing.
Yeah, absolutely. I was gonna say a lot of like in-camera stuff as well, like especially with this film with the mirror effects and all that. It's a lot of stuff.
That's what I'm alluding to, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so it's promising. Then it's like, all right, he's worked with other writers before. He's worked with Simon Pegg mostly. It's so promising that Last Night in Soho, he worked on this movie with Christy Wilson Cairns, who was the co-screenwriter of 1917 with Sam Mendes. That's how she met Edgar Wright. Yeah, the Oscar-nominated film for screenplay. Who knows why? But, I mean, yeah, and for Best Picture, too, which 1917, terrific film. I really loved that one. And I remember it fondly.
Yeah, I guess I'm in the same camp with 1917 as I am for Baby Driver, weirdly.
I mean, I think we just have different sensibilities or something, because, again, it's a movie that I guess I get a lot of joy personally, and I know not everybody. I mean, I'm not saying you don't, but I just get so much joy from the craft in that movie, and I think the heart of it too. All that said, Last Night in Soho was Edgar Wright's first time doing a story about a young woman. She's played by Thomasin McKenzie. It takes place in the modern day mostly, and she lives out in the countryside outside of London. She goes to university to be a fashion designer. And she's not fitting in super well. Things aren't going super smoothly for her. She has this thing, like as soon as we meet this character, she's obsessed with the 1960s. This movie had my heart on a platter when it begins with an opening dance number alluding to Breakfast at Tiffany's, one of my all-time favorite films. Another film, I guess, that I love in spite of its fatal flaws related to Mickey Rooney. That's all I'll say about that. But I still love it. And from the jump, we get the sense that like this woman is so nostalgic for a different time. The 1960s, a time that she wasn't even born in, or she wasn't even alive. She was, decades before she came around, but she's obsessed with it, and she kind of includes it in like her fashion and everything. And as she is having trouble fitting in and trying to, find herself, she starts to have these dreamlike visions of being a different person, almost like she might be traveling in time. Who knows? When she goes to sleep, transporting herself to the 1960s, sort of in, I don't think she possesses, but she's kind of like in the mirror, as you were saying, reflection of another character named Sandy, played by Anya Taylor-Joy. So a bit of a two-hander, this movie. And she kind of experiences vicariously the past through this other woman and the trials and tribulations, the joys and the lows of what that entails. And all of this stuff that I'm describing is when Last Night in Soho, I'm sitting there in the theater, Will, and I'm like, is this one of my favorite movies of the year? Because I love every minute of this. I love Thomasin McKenzie, who plays Eloise. I love the music. I love the costume design. I love the mechanic. I love the first scene where she goes to the 1960s in her jammies. She's in Soho, which I forgot to mention. Soho in the 1960s was like a mecca of culture at the time. And she is just like embracing the joy of this era. And that's when this movie is about how great the past could be and how we could sort of learn from the past, and nostalgia can be tricky but great. And then the movie nosedives into actually nostalgia is toxic, which I'm like, you know what? That's cool. I like that thought. I like that idea. And then the movie completely goes off the rails and becomes a massive disappointment, which I'm sure we'll get into. But Will, I gotta say, this is easy for me, far and away the worst Edgar Wright film. It's bizarre because the first part of it is so good, and the rest of it is just bizarrely weak and meandering and repetitive and a slog. And by the end, I was so done with it. So I'm curious, what do you think of Last Night in Soho? Did it work for you? Was it a dream or was it a nightmare?
I would agree that it's probably my least favorite Edgar Wright film. I don't think that speaks so much to how I feel about the film, but rather to what esteem I put the rest of the films on his filmography. I actually just rewatched Shaun of the Dead this week. And I don't know if I'm still, I think, warmer on Hot Fuzz and The World's End comparatively, but I still think that movie is a lot of fun. And it was nice to kind of revisit that film, having seen Last Night in Soho and then the issues that come in the second half. Though I guess for me, I think it's less the second half that bugs me and more just the last act, the last third of it that I think is really messy and falls apart. Because similar to you, I like that the first half of it is willing to be, like you said, sort of like almost like a horror version of Midnight in Paris, where we're exploring the dangers of nostalgia and like the idea of like the dangers of living in the past, ignoring the dangers that come from that time period by glossing over and celebrating, like the wonderment of it or like a false image of it. I think that stuff, not necessarily deep or profound, but I think it's done in a, artfully engaging way. And I think Edgar Wright has a lot of fun playing with that time period. I think the period design and all the production design in general in the film is fantastic, especially recreating that era. I think it looks gorgeous on the big screen. I think that stuff is really solid. And I agree with you, Thomasin McKenzie. I think she has that doe-eye innocence I think you want, but she's also, I think, very nuanced in her performance, as she is in all of her other performances we've seen for her to date. I think she is unexpectedly quite compelling as a lead actress, and I think especially as far as like Edgar Wright's filmography is concerned, especially considering that like his lead characters, I guess with the exception maybe of Scott Pilgrim, have kind of more of a well, actually no, that's not true, because Baby Driver I guess is also kind of the kind of nuance or mild mannered, I guess, as a character.
Yeah, I mean,
so
he's a white knight, but he's also a criminal. Right.
Sure.
I mean, like all of his main characters have these like big flaws. And yeah, he's one of the ones whose big flaws externalize. It's like, it's not really because he's a bad guy. It's more of he's like caught up in the wrong stuff.
Right. But I think for me, I guess what I found compelling about the first half is that like as made evident by the fact that he borrows a lot and parodies other films and film genres. Like Edgar Wright is clearly very reverent to other films, and this one is meant to be like a mix of like Repulsion, the Roman Polanski film, and then like Don't Look Now, the famous 70s film, and also a lot of Giallo films, I guess, later on, which is what intrigued me. I was like, oh, an Edgar Wright Giallo film. That's very, very intriguing, very exciting for me. But I think the Giallo influences, weirdly and disappointingly, are where the movie falls short. I didn't have as much issues about the second. Yeah, I didn't have as much issues about the second half, but I think my issue as far as the style of it is that Edgar Wright just seems to be too calculated, I guess, as a filmmaker to make the sort of film he wants to make here. I guess his style is so mannered, so precise that it backfires, because Giallo films traditionally are made by guys who I guess have kind of more of like a raw energy to them. They have like this kind of like willingness to go into danger, have like this kind of sense of like having a like kind of like a knife up to your throat, like this sense of danger and raw energy to them. And I just don't think that is communicated here. I just feel like Edgar Wright is so like calculated in his style, so overthinking every little noose and different thing that goes into this, that he just can't really communicate that vibe that he wants to emulate so much. And I don't think that necessarily kills the vibe of the film for the first 90 minutes, but it definitely wanes it down for the second act. And then the third act, I think, just story-wise and from a screenplay standpoint, just gets so messy. Like, it just feels like, I don't know, like Edgar Wright just like forgot how to write characters and stuff at that point. Like, decisions don't make sense, and like things are just so out. It just falls apart without getting into spoilers in a way that I find very baffling and very confusing. But overall, I guess I'm more positive than not. I did really enjoy the first half, and I liked the second half enough that I enjoyed my time in the film. But it sounds like you're overall pretty negative on the film, which is disappointing.
Yes, I mean, I agree with you about the third. Like the final act is so haphazard, and I think there were red flags throughout the film. It's not like it's amazing, like no issues detected until like the turning point that I think happens around the halfway mark, because there are red flags. I mean, there's a character who comes into this who is just bizarrely written to be this like perfect, nice guy. He's played by what's his name? I forget the name of the actor, because I don't know if I've seen him in anything else.
Oh, is it Michael Ajao?
Michael Ajao.
Ajao, okay. He was in Attack the Block, I remember.
Was he really? Wow, I don't remember him in that movie, but he's so one-dimensional. He only exists to be a love interest. He's as one-dimensional as like the Lily James character in Baby Driver, and it's just sort of like, okay, like you can reverse the gender, but that doesn't, it's still a bad trope.
Yeah, and that's that one's also more disappointing because like Edgar Wright's films have primarily been white. He tries to rectify that with this film, but race, as far as it's depicted in the film, is it's not great. I'll just leave it at that, I guess, as far as this film's concerned.
You mentioned the Giallo stuff, and yeah, I mean, I think there's Suspiria all over this movie. There's Dario Argento all over this movie. And just speaking of what you were saying before, I mean, you were trying to say it's like they have all this raw energy and he's too precise. I also think the man is too sentimental. And I think that he really cares about his characters in a way that like Argento, like dude does not. Like you feel that danger because you feel like something really bad could happen at any moment. But with this movie, like we've spent so much time building up how much care and affection we have for the main character that I never believed for a second she was in any real danger. So when you strip that away, the sense of like the immediacy just kind of goes out the window, and then the only people who can be victimized are characters we don't know as well. And so at that point, it's hard to care. I think when it comes down to it, I wouldn't say that Edgar Wright has not, I mean, I suspect he's just not very good at directing horror. I mean, I think Shaun of the Dead is not a movie that I think is good on, like, it's not really supposed to be a horror. It's more of a satire. And this movie, because it doesn't have any of those satirical elements, is a pretty serious movie. Like, Wright's not trying to be funny here. And I think that it ends up, like, when played straight, Wright just, I don't think is good at doing horror. I mean, I think that when he's setting up these set pieces, and like as we kind of mentioned with the screenplay, it's so repetitive. It's the same thing over and over again. The rules of like what's happening don't follow, they don't track, they don't have a lot of consistency. And it's just so annoying to see your main character running and screaming constantly at things that other characters don't see. And and like nothing really comes of it. And it just happens over and over again. And like, it's kind of shocking and it's kind of engaging the first 2 or 3 times. But when we're getting into like dozens of like the same emotional effect he's trying to have on the audience, that's what has me being like, we expect way better from this director, honestly. Like with his movies, he always finds a way to mix things up, keep things interesting. And it's even more disappointing considering the movie gets the emotional engagement really well, because that's the most important thing is like, I'm rooting for the main character. Like that is the hardest job. Most movies can't even get that far to get me to really care and invested. So like to drop the ball in all these other ways is just like, it's just unfortunate.
Yeah. And I mean, like I was saying before, I think Edgar Wright is also just a bit too like chaste as a filmmaker to really dive into like the stuff that's in the second half, like what we were saying, like with the Giallo influence here, there is, like we said, like that rawness, that like kind of like manic energy to those films, and there's like even like sort of a perversion to those films that feels more organic, and that this film, like, it's addressed, but in a way that feels like kind of like I guess like two-handed, like he's kind of like trying to comment on the genre as he usually does with other genres, but like I just think he just fumbles the ball because the commentary doesn't feel quite as pronounced. It kind of feels like he's not like fully short-handed, I guess, in what he wants to say about the film, especially like we said in that last act where it like kind of like comes a bit muddled and confused as far as like what exactly he's even trying to say about like this era and men and, you know, like all these different things. It just I don't think it's an outright mess.
It's saying a lot of obvious stuff, I think.
Yeah, I mean, like it's going between obvious and then just being like confused. Like, I mean, like, there's just, like, some stuff, like, I'm trying to dance around spoilers, but, like, yeah, like, in the last act, like, that last scene, or the last scene in the climax, at least, it's just, like, it says, like, three things at once. I just don't, I don't know, it just seems like, from a screenplay standpoint, it's trying to do too many things at once, or trying to do too many things thematically that just doesn't fully well-round itself as a clear thesis.
I feel really bad for Anya Taylor-Joy in this movie because I think the movie really lets her down, considering that it starts off really strong with her. I mean, when we have the first scene, like her introduction in this movie, and we get some of the best special effects and visual stunt work of the whole thing. It's the sort of thing that I think it's the sort of thing that inspires people to become filmmakers. It's that good. You know, even in the era of CGI, you're watching what's happening on screen, and I'm just amazed. I'm like, how did you do that? How did you shoot that way? There was only like one thing that I saw that was like, okay, it's pretty obvious how he did that. Like he kind of left in a little part of the scene because it's like one shot. So they probably just left in something that's kind of obvious how they duck the character away or something like that. But other things like, you know, he's like, my gosh, did they like get a twin for that person just so they could do that shot? Like reminding me of some of the shots in, you know, some other movies. And it's just, and at the center of it is Anya Taylor-Joy, who is this mysterious and lovely figure. And you buy right away why Thomasin McKenzie's character, Eloise, would idolize her. But yeah, it's a struggle because as the movie goes along, it just sort of leaves that character in the dust. And it takes her character and just like twists and guts her and does all this stuff to her that's bad. And it's like, well, like, what is the message? Kind of like to what you're saying. They do so many things with her that are just so bizarre. I think Matt Smith, he's interesting at first. He's kind of doing this sort of like suave thing. He just becomes a cartoon character, like as the movie goes on. Like that's the thing that bugs me. It's like, you know how to make well-written characters who matter and who are interesting, Edgar Wright. So like, what's going on here? Particularly with, you know, I think Diana Rigg, who her final film performance, and it was really cool to see her in this performance and having a role that is this meaty. There are a lot of really great, by the way, you know, like some, you know, references to, you know, Bond movies. I think like, you know, a lot of people would probably consider like her, I think her first big role, right, was in Her Majesty's Secret Service. And she's like, you know, kind of the like prototypical, like the Bond girl to end all Bond girls. You know what I mean? So like kind of seeing her and like the references, that was kind of cool. But yeah, this character, I'm not even going to say anything because I can't even get into it, I guess. But it's baffling in such a bad way.
Yeah. I also just recently watched a movie she was in called Theater of Blood. Have you seen that one? The Vincent Price film?
No, I have not. Was it amazing?
Okay. It's a lot of fun. Yeah. It's certainly better than Last Night in Soho, I'll say. Yeah, I mean, I think what I find interesting and frustrating about the film is that Edgar Wright is so clearly going against his impulses here. Like he's trying to do something that's outside of his wheelhouse a little bit, as far as like, you know, like we said, he's challenging himself as far as like focusing on women characters. He's, you know, trying not to be totally irreverent in tone. Like he's trying to stay a little bit outside of his lane as far as like going in different directions. But at the same time, it just feels like he is kind of going against the impulses that were, you know, driving his films to be a little bit more confident, a little bit more sure-headed in their approach. And, you know, maybe that wavering could be effective in certain measures. But for a film like this that I think is at once like too sure of itself, like too prim and proper as far as what it wants to do, and in trying to also like kind of go against the grain and be unexpected. It just doesn't really, I think, stick the landing in either respect in those ways. But as a just visual theatrical experience and as a cinematic experience, I think it's a decent bit of fun. And I think there are some horror scenes and themes and all that I think are interesting to explore. But yeah, I think for Edgar Wright fans, it comes as a letdown.
Also, want to mention this was also the final film appearance of Margaret Nolan, who was also in the film. Also, somebody, a Bond, mainstay. She was in Goldfinger, but yeah, film is dedicated to her as well. Mm-hmm. I guess, yeah. I mean, I'm very disappointed. I think that if I was watching this movie and it was by a different director, I'd probably be a little kinder on it, to be honest. I'm not trying to be purposely like grading in on a curve here, but I think that's just it's impossible to avoid that, right? When you're used to a filmmaker and their filmography, this is sort of the end result. I don't know exactly what happened here. I don't know like what happened was if Edgar Wright and Krysty Wilson-Cairns just, if they brought two different things and the result of it didn't work. I don't know. I'm sure it's like a lot of different things that's causing this, but some people like this a lot. And some people are digging it. Some people, and yeah, I'm open-minded to any analysis and criticism of, seeing this movie in a different light. Maybe there are a few things that I could just be missing about how things go down. But I think from a purely like entertainment factor, I think this thing is pretty disappointing for me. And I think even people who might watch it, they might not hate it or anything like that, but they might just be a little bit like, yeah, it's nothing to write home about, is my suspicion. Like most people will probably watch it and be like, that was a movie. But that's sad to me in a way because it's Edgar Wright. I feel like when you watch one of his movies, it tends to stick with you. But this movie's, I don't know. I don't imagine it's going to have a lot of resonance with people, and that's a missed opportunity in its own right. At least in my opinion. But I think all the people involved here, I think Thomasin McKenzie, Anya Taylor-Joy, they're monumental actors. I mean, they can't be stopped. Like they're so fantastic. And, Taylor-Joy is coming off of the, massive success of Queen's Gambit. Thomasin McKenzie is really cementing herself as an indie film like darling. They're good. They're going to be all right. Yeah.
If we're just talking about the actors, I also think Terrence Stamp is quite fun in his supporting role here.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean,
I love Terrence Stamp. I'm always happy to see him. I think he brings the right machismo, I guess, to this role, or whatever the word would be for that.
I'm always happy to see him too. I just, was kind of like, all right, that's the kind of obvious thing, but all right.
Yeah. I don't disagree with what you're saying. I guess I might disagree with the phrasing as far as like, I do think the film is a joy to watch. Maybe not a joy, but like it's entertaining or amusing to watch. I just find it, thinking back on it, to be just messy and it doesn't really stick any particular landing that I want to do. And I guess for me, it just kind of ushers this B-level era for Edgar Wright, where I just felt like his earlier films were, not without their flaws, but I felt like they were a lot more concrete. They had a good head on their shoulders. They kind of knew what they were doing, what they were saying and stuff. And I feel like, at least for me, Baby Driver and this film just... they work as pieces of entertainment, and I think Edgar Wright can make a slick movie, and he knows how to get people jazzed and excited watching a movie, but I just don't think he really nails what he wants to say, and I think that just comes down from a screenplay standpoint. That was my issue with Baby Driver, and it ultimately is my issue here. I just think I guess when he's on his own or even like working with different collaborators, just feels like he's just not really like brushing out the lumps or the issues that he has in screenplays. And I think the movies themselves are starting to suffer for that reason. And I hope he figures it out. But I'll still keep watching stuff. I think he is an entertaining and talented filmmaker, and I hope his other films kind of reach his past successes. But yeah, he's kind of in a mild slump right now, unfortunately.
He has a lot to offer as a filmmaker, and I think he should be appreciated on the basis that like the guy's trying to do original stuff, and it doesn't always work, obviously. But yeah, I guess the only pushback I have there is I don't think Baby Driver was a slump for him creatively. I think it was a boost, and I think that for me, the big difference between that movie and this is that when you watch Baby Driver, I mean, my word, you're watching a movie that is so electric, and it's got so much verve and agency and action, and it's spunky. Like I think that's like the big word for me to describe a lot of his stuff. It's spunky. It's got a lot of spirit. Last Night in Soho, I just think is aimless, almost, and it's trying to. It has ideas, but it just doesn't have the set pieces, the pictures, the cinematography to bring it all together in a thematic way, even though it's got amazing craft in here. And so that's where I land on it. I mean, I think that it really is it's just the screenplay is what it's the one fatal thing that I think brings this thing down. It's like watching somebody like do an amazing swan dive, Olympic athlete level, and then it's just like right into like at the last second,
belly flop.
They reposition into a belly flop. Like that's basically the experience of this movie, and I think that it's just disappointing to see.
I gotta push back though. You said the cinematography was disappointing. I mean, Chung Ho.
No, I'm not saying the cinematography is disappointing. I think I misspoke there. No, it's not disappointing whatsoever. In fact, it's one of the things that kept me through it. Kept me going. Although I do think the horror stuff, the effects and all that stuff, I thought was very weak. Like the apparitions and like that stuff.
Yeah,
it was just
that
whatever.
Was rough. Yeah. Especially I don't know. Just anytime they resort to CG, it's even more glaring considering how good the practical effects are.
Exactly.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I think like I said, the craft I think is there. It's kind of hard to deny that, I think. I mean, I think the production design is pretty spectacular, and I think cinematography is also quite sharp. Like I said, Chung Ho Chung, who did a lot of, what's the guy's name? The guy who did Old Boy and like Stoker, his films. He was the DP for those. And then he also, I think, did It Chapter 1, if I'm not mistaken. He's a really sharp cinematographer, and I mean, it looks nice. It's shot on 35 millimeter. And yeah, I mean, Edgar Wright is a champion of film, and I have to respect that as well. But like I said, like we're saying, screenplay is a bit of a miss, unfortunately, and I think that drags this whole enterprise down, sadly.
Yeah, and I agree with you because I enjoy the cinematography. I like Jung Ho's work as well in Old Boy and a few things. Like I think he did also Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, but I think his like magnum opus is The Handmaiden, the other film he did with Park Chan-wook. Although he did a couple of films with Park. I haven't seen all of them, but there are a couple more that he did, a few more. But I mean, Handmaiden is where his cinematography is like crucial to the success of that movie. Like that movie is like delivered in many respectable ways by how he shot it. And I never saw Hotel Artemis, but I always got the feeling that movie was kind of gaudy. Right. It wasn't like,
Gotti or Gotti?
Gotti.
Okay, not like Gotti, like John Gotti.
Yeah, not like that. But hey, I mean, that can fly. Oh, and I know he's doing, because I saw this, somebody mentioned this the other day. I didn't realize he did the cinematography for Uncharted. The next.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, which is interesting because he did work with Ruben Fleischer, the director of Uncharted. He worked with him on the Zombieland sequel. And, there is that. And I think he's also working on Dev Patel's directorial debut, which I don't know. I don't remember the name of it, but they already shot that. So.
Right. Yeah. Park Chan-wook was the filmmaker I was thinking of, but I couldn't think of his name. I mean, his work in Old Boy and, like you said, Handmaiden is just out of this world good, and Stoker as well. And Stoker,
that was one of the other ones I was trying to remember. I think Chung Ho did also worked on Stoker as well and a few others. So
Mm-hmm.
Anyway. And also, I think the music in Last Night in Soho, I already kind of offhandedly mentioned. I mean, I think Edgar Wright's taste in music is fantastic. It's a big reason why I love Baby Driver and I still listen to the soundtrack. But the soundtrack in this is really good. And the composer for this one is Stephen Price, who, I'm a fan of Stephen Price. I think people probably best know him for his work on Attack the Block and Gravity. But I mean, he's had some really good ones with what was that movie? I know he did Baby Driver as well. But I'm trying to remember, was it the I'm blanking on this. The David Ayer? He worked with David Ayer on like two movies. I know one of them was Suicide Squad. Fury, that's the other one. Okay.
Yes. Which is a good film.
Yeah, I was about to say. It is kind of funny that he did do both of those. But anyway. And he also did Sweet Girl, but which we already talked about this year.
Who could forget Sweet Girl?
Who could forget the music in Sweet Girl? Boy. Anyway, that's Last Night in Soho. It is 116 minutes long. Will Ashton, do you know the Rotten Tomatoes score for Last Night in Soho?
No, actually I don't.
Well, why don't you take a little guess? I have it in front of me right now.
I'm gonna say 78%.
78?
Yes.
78%. You're within the margin of error. 74%. So a little bit lower.
All right.
It's been hovering around there for a while. It's 217 reviews have been counted, and the audience score. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think audience score is high. My audience seemed to be digging it. I'm gonna say 89%.
92%, also within 4 points,
man.
Or within 3 points. That's out of 250 plus verified ratings on Rotten Tomatoes. I didn't see this in a theater, so I saw it in a theater, but at a press screening. So I don't know, what it must have been like if people were getting into it. But the cinema score, what do you think about the cinema score? That could be a tough one for this kind of movie, right? What do you think?
If I have to apply logic to the mad people in the cinema score crowd, I'm gonna assume they're like A+ for the first half of this, and then that last act they're like B-. So I'm gonna say they're gonna give it a firm B+.
You did it, Will Ashton. You got the cinema score right. It's been a while.
Yeah,
but you got it. Proud of you. You got 1 out of 3.
Thank you, John.
Well done.
There you go. I got close to the other two.
You did. You came within spitting distance. So very impressive stuff. All right, that's Last Night in Soho. Check it out if you dare. With that, let's move on to our next and final film of the evening. We're going to talk about a film. We already kind of mentioned it at the top of the show. This one premiered at Sundance, and it's already got a bunch of reviews. It's gotten some notice, but it's finally coming out in earnest. Let's talk about Passing. Passing is a film by Rebecca Hall, who, I got to be honest, Will Ashton, I did not realize that Rebecca Hall was half African American. I did not realize that. She, which is part of why she made this movie, because she is white passing, right? You see Rebecca Hall, and I mean, I don't know about you. She's an English actress, to be clear. So I think I said half African American. I think I don't know where her parents are from, but I think African American is where her mother is from. I'm vaguely trying to remember an interview she did. I think I heard, but yeah, she's got a mix of different things. But she is white passing. That's the point.
Yeah.
You take a look at her and you're like, okay, yeah, white passing. But she's making a movie about how there are people who can pass as white who, depending on different things that they do, might be considered a person of color, right? And the movie takes place in the past. I think the novel came out in 1929. It's been a while since we watched the movie, but I think around, the 1920s is where this movie takes place, I want to say.
Yeah. I was gonna say, haven't read the novel, but I've heard it's a gorgeous book. And
it's
I wanted
highly
to read it.
recommended. I mean, 100 pages, so you can knock it out pretty quick.
Yeah, is it technically a novella?
I think a novella is usually less than 70,000 words, so that would definitely fit the rubric.
Yeah, I wanted to read it. Unfortunately, I did not. But I've heard it's a lovely text.
To sort of complement the subject matter of this movie, which is about Black women who try to pass as white, the movie is shot in black and white, which definitely helps sort of cement the immersion, right? Because I think our main characters here, who are played by Tessa, Thompson, and Ruth Negga, for a lot of people would not be considered white passing, right? But the movie is kind of banking on that. It's kind of purposefully using women of color in order to tell this story, and I think in a very smart way. For me personally, but obviously we're dealing with some tricky subject matter here, so I'm eager to get into this. So the film also stars Andre Holland and Bill Camp and Alexander Skarsgård. The setup is that we're introduced to Tessa Thompson, right? Who she's not going out of her way to pass as white. She's just sort of dabbling and using the fact that she can briefly pass as white in momentary, like, sort of jaunts through like white areas. So she's able to go to like a restaurant and no one's going to bother her because she's able to, I think something that they mentioned in the film that they do is that, like, I don't think she does this, but like some characters kind of put on certain makeup or they sort of hide certain features. They do things to sort of make this work. And while she's doing one of these things, she's sort of hanging out in an area where if they knew that she had a black husband, that she herself was black and she had black children, they would not allow her in, right? And while she's there, she runs into somebody. This is in Chicago, I think, by the way. While she's there, she runs into an old friend, somebody she knew from childhood, played by Ruth Negga. And she discovers that this person has been doing this like regularly. She's married to a white man who, if he knew that she was black and came from a black neighborhood and all of that, then he would be horrified because he is extremely like bigoted. He says at one point, someone's like, "Oh, Mr. Bellew, do you not like Negroes?" And he says, "Oh no, I hate them," or something along those lines. Again, I'm trying to remember the exact wording. It's been a while since I saw this movie, but it's obviously like he's not the kind of person who should know that this is happening, because then bad things will happen, right? And, the movie is sort of about the friendship between these women who live on opposite ends of this line where they can both pass. One of them is choosing to do it as a lifestyle. One isn't. Tessa Thompson is living what Ruth Negga's character sees as idyllic because she is happily married to her husband, played by Andre Holland. She has wonderful kids. They are, they're well-to-do, especially for, the neighborhood that they come from. And Ruth Negga sort of is doing something different. And to Tessa Thompson, what she's doing is sort of idyllic, and it's sort of about how these women kind of come together and sort of like spark a friendship. And then other stuff happens where the film kind of gets a little bit noir. I remember liking this film quite a bit. I think that it was very engaging and very thoughtful and had a lot to say. And I thought it was it's like a food for thought kind of movie. I don't think it's the most memorable movie for what it is. Like I don't remember watching it and being like, I'll never forget that shot or anything. Like, I don't know. There was none of the direction here I thought was like amazing or, super out of the norm, but I liked it overall. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I saw the film, it was very apparent to me why Rebecca Hall felt so passionate about the text, why she spent, I think she said at the time, like 10 or 15 years trying to bring it to the screen. I don't remember exactly what she said. I apologize if we say that a lot, because it's been almost a year since we've seen the film. So I apologize if we keep saying it's been a bit since we've seen the film. But yeah, I mean, I think, as I was saying before, I think one of the big reasons why I wanted to read the book was because it's so apparent, like, how dense and evocative the text is, just even from her adaptation of it, like how much snapping wit there is to the dialogue, but also just like how thoughtful and like what's the word exactly, like there's like almost like sort of like a lyricalness to the film in terms of like how it's like laid out and story and all that, but there is also like this sense that, like, because I think she's a first-time filmmaker, I don't think Rebecca Hall quite nails like the pacing of the story, especially when we're dealing with a story like this that deals with like several, I think, years or at least several months of time and like two different characters at two different points in their lives. I don't think it quite handles everything it's trying to chew on. It's like a lot of meat to deal with, but I do think the central performances, especially from Tessa Thompson, I think really helps to navigate some of the bumpy aspects of the narrative in a way that really brings a lot of complexity and nuance to these characters. And I think there are at least like 2 or 3 scenes here that I think are really sensational and I think really stand out. The first one is like the opening at the like restaurant that they're at, where I think the way she leads up to like the hotel room scene. I think that scene is just so gorgeously filmed, and just like the way it's written and how Rebecca Hall photographs it, I think is outstanding. I really like the middle segment with like Bill Camp, if you remember that, where like they're in like that bar and then there's like that kind of like weirdly almost like voyeurist like quality where they're like kind of like looking into like the other lives of these like different rich well-to-do people and how like they're like just completely oblivious to things even though they feel like they're like on top of the world and all that. And I love the ending of the film. I think that's where I gotta push back on what you're saying where some of the direction doesn't stand out. I think some of those shots are just incredible. And I think if the movie was on that level throughout, I think like, yeah, like Rebecca Hall made like one of the best films of the year. I think as it stands, I think she's, really dynamic filmmaker here. And I would like to see her do more. But I think, I admire the passion. I admire the ambition, but I don't think it completely nails everything it wants to do just because the text is so dense, even though, as we mentioned, it's a novella and a fairly short book. There's just so much going on here in terms of what she wants to do and communicate as a first-time filmmaker that I don't think she can hit every target effectively. But I think the fact that she's going for that and clearly making, like you said, very thoughtful, very searching stories here, I think it speaks highly to her as a storyteller and certainly someone I want to keep following in addition to being, as we have said in other reviews, an outstanding actress.
I'll definitely say the stuff I remember the most from this movie, like the beginning and the very end, a lot of the stuff in the middle just doesn't come to me as easily. A lot of it did feel a little bit like you kind of mentioned the pacing. It did feel a little bit like fluff.
And it's, a lot of it's in the house too, which kind of prevents it from feeling super memorable.
And I think I said Chicago earlier, and I just looked it up. That they're in New York in this movie, but I think they know each other from Chicago. But that said, I think that the movie is kind of walking us through like how their relationship sort of changes. I do recall, there is some stuff here about like an obsession that grows between the two characters. That's where it kind of gets into its noir roots. I think that's what bugs me a little bit about how the film sort of transitions from that into the ending part, which the ending starts to be more about, I don't know, something about like the tragedy of like these two women. And I think it like moves away from what I think the social commentary is saying to just sort of being like a straightforward noir. I thought the ending was just a little bit too, I don't know, reminiscent of different films that do that sort of thing a little bit better. Like these sort of like vague, mysterious endings. I thought it was like very pretentious almost. And I was like, I didn't feel like that's really what this movie is supposed to or wanting to sort of be, I suppose. Like I just got the sense that Rebecca Hall wanted to finish it this way for the sake of it instead of finishing it in a way that was true to the heart of the commentary, which I thought was way more nuanced than the ending. I thought the ending was just sort of like abstract for the sake of it in some sort of respects. And I guess it just didn't really click for me.
I think the ending works. I just kind of wish the build up to it was more effective. I think we agree. I don't think I feel as strongly as you do about the ending not quite clicking, because I think what she's going for, the ending, while perhaps to be expected, I think is really well done. And for me, as you mentioned, I think the middle here is where it just kind of falters. Outside of that one scene, I think it just doesn't really have enough to like stand out and really kind of like bring the crescendo out to full force. It just, I think that's more of an issue of her just being a first time filmmaker and trying to do so much with this first film. And, I think a lot of it really does work. I think for as much this movie is like so elegant and so like trying to be respectful and reverent to text, there's something I remember feeling oddly kind of muted about the film, like something that just feels like emotionally almost sort of stunted. And I think that's where we agree, is that it just feels like there's something sort of lacking, not for a lack of effort in the middle of the film that just prevents the film from really reaching its full emotional heights.
I guess so. There were times where I felt like maybe Rebecca Hall was holding back a little bit with really going all out with what she wants to say. I mean, I can understand her position where she's probably trying to be very mindful of colorism and, the fact that there are a lot of people who look at this phenomenon and they have strong feelings about it one way or the other, especially people who have very negative feelings about people who choose to do this. Mm-hmm. And I think Rebecca Hall wanted to make something nuanced, right? She didn't want to make something that was really one-sided. And I do think that was really smart of her. But at the same time, I think that because of that, I think the movie sort of, by the end of it, lacks a point of view in general. And that's why I'm kind of looking at it. I'm like, well, there were moments here where I think she had an opportunity to say something really validating and interesting and something that will actually like move people and bring them to some sort of like discussion point. But I think we end up just sort of talking about this enigmatic ending that I don't think really has much to do with, this idea of like, what does it mean to pass? Like, there are people who pass for things all the time. So what is the difference between, why is it that you can't pass for, a person who is black can pass for white, but a person who is white typically can't pass for black? Like, what does that all mean? And I think the movie just sort of asks questions without offering, even the basis for the audience to answer those questions. Like, I get it. Like, movies don't always answer their own questions, and that's well and good, but they should at least equip people for those conversations, because I think those can be really interesting too.
I think it's less a lack of point of view and more that I don't think quite finds that balance between our two central characters. And that's not to say that there aren't moments of grace between them, but I just think, obviously Tessa Thompson's her perspective, I think, gets the forefront here. And I think because we spend less time focusing on Ruth's side of the story, it just doesn't quite... I think the ending doesn't quite hit those marks that it's trying to go for. But yeah, I can agree that maybe it's trying to ask more questions and answer them. But for me, I don't really mind that. I guess I kind of like a movie that just wants to ask some questions and raise some thoughtful discussions. That's fine with me. I don't have any issue with that. But at the same time, I do, like I said, find myself kind of curious about the decision to kind of, like you said, mute the film in certain ways. I wonder if that's her kind of directly commenting on like movies of this time having this sort of like intended like melodrama, and she's trying to push back against that, except for, I guess, in the end. I think there's something to be said about that, and something I find very intriguing. But yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of it does work, but I don't know if the pieces all come together in a way that makes this a truly great film. But I think as it stands, it's a pretty good film with some great moments. Agreed.
One thing that I'm still, because these performances are really great. I think Ruth Negga is the real star of this movie for me. I think that she is just like a powerhouse in this movie. That said, I think one thing that I think Rebecca Hall included in this movie that I just felt like never really went anywhere was it seemed like she was trying to input this whole dynamic where it's like a jealousy in this friendship between the two women. And, there was like an obsession by one person and like unrequited friendship. Like, she's dabbling into that. And it also sort of felt like she was maybe vaguely putting in this subject matter about, do these women feel like a romantic attraction to one another? And I think I've been wondering if anybody I talked to a couple people who've picked up on the same thing, but yeah, I get the movie is like so vague about it that it's sort of up for interpretation. And I guess it's more frustrating than anything else, because I don't know. I think a little bit more of an indication between like, okay, well, let's say that that's what's happening here, that there is this sort of like, it's not just that these women yearn to be in a society that would just accept them for who they are and they could just be themselves. You can sort of see like how that would relate right to, a theme of them, possibly being in love with each other. But I don't know. I think the film kind of just, it sort of like dances with that sort of thing, but it never quite goes all the way with it. And I'm still chewing on it. Like, I'm not sure what to think of it. And I don't know if I would probably have to watch the movie again to have any sort of firm opinion, but it seems like we're kind of on the same page with this. It's a light recommendation. It's the kind of thing, it's like, you probably want to check it out if you're a fan of Rebecca Hall in general. As an actor, She is fantastic. And so it's great to support her filmmaking career, because I'm sure she has plenty to offer there, but it's not something that I think is going to blow everybody away. I don't expect that.
Yeah, certainly if you're a fan of Rebecca Hall, I think it's worth checking out. Certainly if you're a fan of the actors, we didn't even mention Andre Holland is in the film as well, and I think
I mentioned him.
Quite good as he usually... Oh, did you mention him? I missed you saying that.
I think he's twice.
Quite good. Oh, really? Then I am oblivious. I don't know.
Well, I didn't get into what I thought of his performance.
Sure.
I think he's good.
Yeah, I think he's always good. I really like him. I've enjoyed him a lot since I remember first paying notice when he was in The Nick, which is a fantastic show, and I'll continue to champion it if people ever get a chance to check it out.
I champion High Flying Bird, but I got to say the Eddie was a bit of a disappointment. I didn't think that was quite
really
strong, considering Andre Holland.
I forgot
his performance, his talent, and Damien Chazelle's talent. So there's that.
But yeah, I mean, I think above all else, I would recommend it to people who like the book. I think they're going to probably get the most out of it. Maybe because they have the relationship with the characters already that might fill in some of the pieces that, you know, for the two of us who haven't read the book that maybe we're missing. But, you know, I think it's worth watching. I certainly imagine it looks nice on the big screen if you can see it that way, but I haven't had the chance to see it in that presentation. But you know, it's a nice Netflix watch. You know, kind of an odd choice, I feel, for Netflix to pick this movie up. I don't know. I remember when I heard that news, I was kind of puzzled because I was like, yeah, I mean, like, it doesn't not make sense, but it also kind of feels like a movie like this can easily get lost on Netflix because, like we said, it's asking big questions. It's like kind of more probing for thought. And I feel like those type of films tend to get kind of lost in the shuffle on Netflix, rather unfortunately.
Agreed. Well, I think we don't really know what Rebecca Hall is going to do next, right? I mean, she was in Godzilla vs. Kong. She was in an anthology film that I don't know if she was in it or directed it, though, but it already premiered at Tribeca. It's called Within. And
the COVID anthology film. I remember hearing about that.
I remember hearing about it. I know she was involved with it. I think she's an actor in it, though. I don't think she actually like directed or wrote any of it. So yeah, we don't really know what's going to, maybe she's taking a little bit of a break. Well deserved, because she's been working super hard. She was in The Night House, of course. And, you know, and solid movie there, but that is passing. It is not a long movie. It's only 98 minutes. So you can get through it pretty fast, and it's going to be on Netflix next week. So I hope it finds an audience there. Will Ashton, though, time to play our game.
Yeah.
Passing on Rotten Tomatoes. What do you think? I imagine that there are plenty of reviews since it kind of did the film festival thing. And sure enough, it's been counted 136 times on Rotten Tomatoes. There's your hint.
Yeah.
So out of those reviews, what do you think? How many critics do you think, percentage-wise, give this one a fresh?
I'm going to say 84%.
Once again, you're within 4 points. It's
Okay.
88%.
88%.
It's like the opposite, because last time you guessed 78, but it was 74. This time it was 88, but you guessed 84.
Right. Oh, well.
Yeah. What are you going to do? The harder you fall. But okay, so 88%, very high. Very solid stuff, and I can see why. It's hard to look at this movie and just be like, that was terrible. Like it's pretty competently made. So congrats on Rebecca Hall for
a nice, sophisticated, sensitive type of film. I think you know, people will respond to it. Yeah,
it's got a lot going for it, and it makes the most of it. Okay, but what about audience score? Now there isn't a count of verified ratings, so I don't know if we should even take stock in the audience score right now. It has fewer than 50 ratings, but what would you guess for now?
I imagine that people who have seen it are responding well to it, especially if they've seen it in theaters. So I'm going to say 94%.
62%.
Oh, wow. I was way off on that one.
But again, I think, Will, you're probably closer to what it'll be later on, because I don't know, like fewer than 50 ratings. And yeah, a lot of people haven't seen it. And I wonder if people are sort of, you know, review bombing it, because one thing that I think I've noticed a little bit from some people is that like they hate like when movies acknowledge that things exist that make people uncomfortable. You know, like one thing that's been bugging me about Eternals.
You don't say.
It's like people are getting mad. They're like, this movie's a diversity checklist, and I'm like, you have the weirdest priorities when it comes to watching a movie. You're annoyed because you think there's like an imaginary checklist. I don't know. I think stuff like that's going on where it's like it has nothing to do with the movie. It's just people being pedantic.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, on the other side of the camp, there are some weird Marvel stands right now who, you know, people on Twitter are just like, I don't know, that doesn't look that great. And they're like, what's the matter? Are you racist? And it's like this like kind of weird, just like, calm down. Like, can everyone just have like a civil conversation about this movie?
I haven't seen that. I've seen people just sort of be like, you don't get Eternals. Like, you don't understand it. And I'm like, okay, whatever you say. You're probably right.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that next week.
You've dealt with some very extremes stuff with that, unfortunately.
Yes. One death threat so far. Just one, though. But I don't know. It tends to happen if you're negative on a superhero film with DC or Marvel.
Right.
There's no cinema score. I guess we could guess ahead of time. And it's not going to have one, right? Because it's Netflix. But I'd imagine people would probably be like B minus.
Sure.
Probably B.
Yeah. The Vegas crowd, they forgot to show up.
I think it's just,
that's at 4:00, right? And like, no, the screen's at 2.
Yeah.
Like, oh, jeez.
I guess I'm going to pass.
Yeah, well, that was leading up to that joke for sure.
Oh,
Yeah,
my bad.
Just give me a passing grade. But yeah, sure.
There you go. Nice. Okay, yeah, that would have been way better. But all right, that's passing. We already kind of alluded to what we're talking about next week. That's going to be Eternals. It's going to be the big film, big to do. There's a lot of other stuff. I mean, we might talk about Finch, which is coming out on Apple TV Plus. We might talk about Red Notice, which I don't think you're looking forward to, Will Ashton.
Is that coming out already?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be on Netflix yet. It's a Netflix movie. But I thought it was supposed to be, I think it's on Netflix the week after. And then this week, I think it's going to be in a few theaters.
Oh, man, that's news to me.
Yeah, because it's being released, I think, through Universal as well.
Sure. Why not?
But for people who don't know, the reason Will is upset, this is the new Ryan Reynolds film with Dwayne The Rock Johnson and Gal Gadot. Yeah. It's supposed to be...
I like Ryan Reynolds fine.
Okay. Yeah, we'll rewind the tape on our Free Guy conversation, I guess.
I don't like his career choices right now. I like, as an actor, I'm fine with him. I think he's actually quite talented.
Hey, Free Guy, one of the most successful films of 2021 so far, right? I mean, have you seen the domestic box office lately?
I choose not to.
You choose not to? That's sad.
I don't.
Well, Free Guy is the 10th highest grossing film of the year so far, and worldwide, right? Like,
why not?
Like, not domestically. The worldwide film is a Chinese film, but the number one worldwide film that is American is F9. And
makes sense.
Yeah, that's not too surprising, right?
Yeah.
But if you're just looking at domestic box office, Free Guy is number 7, and then Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings has made the most film domestically than any other movie. It's like over $200 million. So big success for that franchise. Like, Disney clearly is going to be keeping up the Shang-Chi energy, despite what happened with Simu Liu earlier this year. But anyway, so Red Notice will be in some theaters. And what else is coming out besides that?
Spencer's coming out.
Yeah, the TIFF sensation from Neon.
Yeah. Pablo
Larraín's latest. Have we talked about Pablo Larraín on the show before? Did we talk about Fantastic Woman? Because I remember seeing it and liking it a lot, but I don't know if we reviewed it.
I don't think we reviewed it. We both saw it, and I think we both liked it. I don't think we talked about it on the show. Let me see what there's a beta test.
Oh, he just produced Fantastic Woman. He didn't direct it. I'm sorry. I'm mixing it up. Fantastic Woman was directed by Sebastian Lelio.
Okay, that's what
I thought. So apologies for the mishap there.
The Gloria Bell filmmaker.
Yeah. But Jackie, I think, was the last movie from Pablo Larraín that I saw. And yeah, that was before you and I, we got to work on Cinema Hawks. Like, literally right before. It was like weeks before our first episode.
Right. Because didn't we talk about it in that like bonus thing we did? Or one of the bonuses? Like, we talked about like the Oscars and stuff. Or I don't know.
Possibly. Very possibly.
But there's The Harder They Fall on Netflix that's coming out. I'm hearing good things about that.
Heard good thing, yeah. Good scores on the Rotten Tomato. Like, critics are liking it. Beta test. I know we're hoping to see that from IFC Films. That's the new Jim Cummings.
Right.
Up and coming.
Sure.
You know, Wolf of Snow Hollow, I think.
Was that a pun?
Might have been.
Sure.
Hope you're okay with that. But no, did we end up talking about Wolf of Snow Hollow?
Yes.
I think you did, but I don't think I was there because I don't think I saw it.
No, I think the three of us did because I remember it was.
I think you and Abby talked about it, but I don't think I was around.
Or I think you were around, but you didn't discuss it.
That might be the
case. A mini review between the two of us. I think
that's probably it. Yeah. But his new movie's coming out, so we might be able to talk about that.
And then there's Beans. You hear about Beans?
I heard you hear about Beans.
Beans. It's with the woman from Downsizing, I think, is in it.
the actress who was in that movie.
Yeah.
I never saw the movie, but I heard she was an interesting person. But this is didn't this movie come out last year?
It was at last year's TIFF. It's finally coming out in wide this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well.
Maybe
yeah.
actually,
lots of stuff to look at. I mean, too much stuff.
Yeah. Actually, I totally made that up. The actress I was thinking of was not in Beans. I think I'm thinking of a totally different movie.
Oh, that's a shame. There's also Dangerous from Lionsgate, the new Scott Eastwood film. And you're right. Nobody cares. But I think Mel Gibson is also in it. So I think it's just going to be like
sure. Scott Eastwood and Mel Gibson. Why not? Let's just put them together.
Tyrese Gibson is in it as well.
What?
And I hate to break your heart, but Tom K. Jansen.
What a rap party that must be. What was that? Sorry, what was that?
I would not like to be a fly on that wall. But yeah, so a lot of stuff we could talk about, which I think we'll for sure talk about Eternals. I really hope that we can get to Spencer. I think that'll be tough, though, if we can both wrangle time to see it. We weren't able to get screenings, so yeah, it's just going to be tricky. But whatever happens. I think we talked about maybe doing a bonus episode for Belfast a little early, since we're both going to see that early, and so keep your eyes out for that as well.
Yeah, a lot of stuff coming up. So if you're a fan of Cinemaholics, get ready.
Yeah, you're not gonna be left wanting. That's for sure. That'll do it for our show this week. We'll see you all next time from the Internet California. I'm John Negroni.
And for Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Weston.
See you next time.